morning, world. This is Steve Rao on behalf of IBMTV, International Broadcast Media Television. And on IBMTV's World Edition, we talk about global affairs, innovations, and what we can do to grow and defeat this pandemic, grow our economies, and take care of each other during these disruptive times. But today, my monologue is about Joseph R. Biden, the 46th President of the United States. And we are here today on this show to give him a report card of his performance last night as he addressed for the first time in his presidency, and today celebrating his 100th day as the President of the United States. I give him an A. I believe President Biden took a pitch-perfect victory lap for reaching the $200 million COVID vaccine dose administered in less than 100 days in office, more than twice the number he had originally promised, and going back to his campaign slogan, reminding the American people that we must always choose hope over fear, truth over lies, and light over darkness. He spent much time selling his infrastructure plan, politically sharp, focusing on items with broad support. What I noticed was his focus on clean water systems, building a power grid, and new roads and bridges, and directly looking and focusing on independent working class votes that strayed away from the Democratic Party, really playing to the Trump base by reminding Americans that they don't have to go to college to get a work, that many of these jobs could be through training in community colleges, vocational trades, and many of these jobs being created in green and new energy under the Infrastructure Act. By emphasizing that 90% of the estimated jobs won't require a college degree, he definitely was playing to the Trump base and was selling himself as a centrist who could heal America and bring us forward. He says it's a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America. In addition, he called out the Congress to bring immigration reform to the table. Didn't talk much about the situation on the border, but focused on the dreamers, the farmers, the TPS holders, the undocumented immigrants, and also the legal skilled immigrants in America. I could go on, but when it's all said and done, there are a couple of points to make before we begin our discussion. All of these initiatives will cost eventually $6 trillion, as he also talked about his American Child Care Plan, the tax credits for families, and he wants to expand that. When you add the COVID relief, the infrastructure bill, the child plan, family plan, it's about $6 trillion. And he plans to pay for it by taxing Americans who make over $400,000 and the wealthier corporations whom he challenges to pay their fair share. When it's all said and done, President Joseph R. Biden, who they are likening to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, must remember two very important things. Unlike Roosevelt or even President Obama, this president does not have significant majorities in either party, which means he will have to work with senators like Joe Manchin to make sure that there is bipartisanship, and he may not have the votes to get a lot of these things done. The second thing to remember, though, is that he does live every day in the White House with aggressive purpose. And it does seem that this president is on the move, and he wants America to be on the move. He wanted the world to know, before we begin our panel, that America is back. But the United States of America needs to be back forever. But he challenged each and every one of us watching last night to never doubt America. Mr. President, I give you an A, but we're going to see what our panel says shortly. Good luck on your 101st day in the White House tomorrow, April 30th. Thank you, Mr. President. And that's my take for this week. And so we have Rakesh from New Zealand, Sasha Starr.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So we're going to spend the first 30 minutes giving the president a grade. I really hope Shaquille Latimer shows up to keep this exciting. And it was hard to my monologue in I tried to keep it short because we could have spent all day talking about all the initiatives, but I tried to sort of frame it in such a way where it could talk about some of the things that he's got going for him and some of the challenges. So I guess I'll start with you, Sasha Starr. What are your thoughts about President Biden's address to the United States Congress, or what you're hearing out there about it?
I would consider this as a speech by the uh, extra class statesman. He's a real thing. I remember that just what about a year ago, someone, some kind of a con man, called him a sleepy Joe. Well, wake up. Someone is nowhere now. He completely disgraced, he disappeared, he is nowhere to be found. And so called Sleepy Joe is becoming a giant of American politics. If some people are trying to compare him with comparing to FDR or some other great people, I think he's well above them. He's really well above them, because what he is trying to do with the limited means what he has under his disposal, it's absolutely incredible. But the message is also fantastic in terms that he's talking about America being united and everybody have to act together or so on. But apparently what he's doing very skillfully, he's completely dismissing and decimating the Republican Party. They're becoming party of irrelevance, party of losers, with a loser on top of it. And but he's doing it very gentle way. He's not saying that you're nobodies and please get out of here. He's just creating an aura that he brings them, okay, let's work together or so on. And he put them in a corner, because everything what he's proposing is so logical and very popular with American people that Republicans have no choice. What are you going to say? No, we're not going to work together with you. Then their situation is even worse. Now, if they're saying that, okay, we are going to work with you, then who needs you anyway? Because we are going to do it all the way anyway. I'm impressed.
Well, Mark Lee, what are your thoughts? We're going to start with you and then go to Rakesh, if that's okay, Rakesh. What are your thoughts? Okay, well, first of all, you have to answer the question: A, B, C, D, or F. What do you get? Where do you grade him? And then what impressed you about the speech? What didn't impress you about the speech?
Well, I was totally impressed with the speech. I thought that he did a great job, an amazing job. Even some of the things that happened with Joe, just because of the nature of his presidency and the nature of his health, and definitely, he's been a stutterer all his life, so there were a couple of stuttering things that happened there that was part of the speech, but I did not think that affected the speech, and I still thought he was an effective orator and gave a great job in terms of getting his message out there, letting folks know what he thought and everything of that nature. And I actually listened to both speeches, and don't know why I stayed up and listened to Tim Scott's speech, but I did listen to that, and in my mind, there was like circles around each other in terms of the way that President Biden handled his speech versus the Republican response, even though the Republican response was well crafted and definitely had some interesting points as well. But I was glad to see him deal with some issues that I think a lot of folks are very much concerned about. Everything from where we are in the pandemic fight, to where we are in race relations, to where we are with the climate, to a number of other issues. I know that here on this network, we've talked about foreign policy and whether he's been addressing that. And I thought that he did bring that to the forefront as well, talking about the ways that he's communicating with the allies, but also communicating with the adversaries. And it doesn't seem like he's holding any kind of punch when talking to the adversaries, be that Syria, be that China, or be that the Soviet Union. So definitely I was glad to see him be very forthright in his attitudes and in about the ways that he was addressing the nation and the public. And so definitely I felt that it was a well-crafted and wonderful speech. And he even had some moments where it looked like he was even doing some things that are ad lib and all of that. So I
Yeah.
was quite impressed, and I would definitely give it an A+. I'd even give it an A++.
Yeah, I didn't talk. Rakesh, what are your thoughts? I didn't talk about foreign policy much or Tim Scott, so we'll talk a little bit about that today because I thought that'd be interesting. He did mention China and working with our allies and our adversaries, but most of the focus was on domestic policy. Rakesh, from New Zealand, what is your perspective? I know you might not have even watched the speech, but from what I've said, what do you think about President Biden's first 100 days?
Well, actually, because of yesterday, I paid attention to what BBC reported on his speech, even if I didn't watch his speech. And I saw that the first priority was jobs, which takes care of America today, education, which takes care of America tomorrow, and social care, which is something which, bolsters the poor and brings them to the middle class. So I think he's got it right. He's got the whole thing right. Um, I wouldn't. The aims have been spelt out. Now it's what's left is execution, and I look forward to seeing him succeed in that direction.
Fantastic. Now, I guess, so we've talked about, bold initiatives in climate change, race, insurrection on democracy. When he began the speech, he really talked about when I became president. It really was sort of a great summation about, we were in a COVID nightmare. We had an insurrection in our democracy, the worst since the Civil War. We've had race relationships, destroyed. And he did talk about crime and police enforcement and all those things. But, to me, I find it, I want to shift into, it was just a reminder of what a rough year it's been and how this president came in during such a rough time. But one of the things politically that I think I want to talk about today is the shift in tax policy. Do you believe, and I was having a debate with someone the other day, that does taxing the wealthy and those corporations making billions and billions of dollars, is that going to hurt the economy because then those companies might not hire as much? Or do you think it would stimulate the economy? I'm going to start with Sasha Starr since he's on Economics Monday. Do you think it's fair for the president to tax the rich to help more people in America?
Absolutely. Whom else are you going to tax? The poor? Probably not. Of course, you have to tax the rich, but what he's emphasizing is that it will not touch people who are earning less than $400,000. So it's quite logical that people who are doing well and who's doing much better even in the pandemic time, in fact, many times better, if they will contribute a little bit more, and I don't see anything wrong with that. They won't even notice this, possibly.
Yeah, I mean that's what is your thought, Mark Lee?
No, I definitely think that it's been in the thoughts of many people for a while that we definitely need to have some more fair equity in the tax rules and things of that nature. Definitely those that are making that kind of money have not been paying their fair shares. And as he pointed out, some of them have not been paying any taxes. And that's absolutely unfair and everything. And I think he also pointed out some of the disparity in terms of the wages and the money that some of these employees are getting compared to their own employees in their own companies. So definitely, I think it's something that's been in the works, definitely from the Democratic side for a while, and I'm actually in favor of that. Like I said, I'm nowhere near that income bracket, probably closer toward the latter side, the poor side and everything. But definitely, I may know some folks that are in that bracket, and I think that most of them are prepared to take more responsibility. But then again, some of the entrepreneurs and business owners that I know are definitely more progressive in their political views, and definitely want to do something to help stimulate the economy and feel that this is a way that they can do their fair share. I don't know many people that are in the Donald Trump camp and things of that nature, so I don't try to stay away from those folks.
Rakesh, what is your thought? I mean, what is the perspective in New Zealand? Is it you think fair to tax the wealthier and help do more of these programs? The $6 trillion is a lot of money that is
Well,
paid for.
I think that taxing the rich is not an issue. It's as Sasha said, who else are you going to tax? The key factor is to make sure that the taxation rate that is charged um, appears to be reasonable to whoever is going to pay the tax. That's the if that is carefully managed, I think people will cheerfully pay the tax, because nobody becomes rich in a vacuum. You don't, sort of make gold out of lead. You make gold or whatever you make out of the infrastructure that the country provides for you. So you have to be conscious of that and do your fair share, as Mark had also mentioned. Do your fair share. I think that is the way democracy is supposed to perform. If anybody just feels that he can rip off the government or rip off the people and exploit them, that's not going to work.
Yeah,
I definitely would agree with that. Steve, I did have a quick question. I started to jump in and hear everything. But one of the things that he said, that I was curious about, and I'd love to hear your response and everything, was that he was going to tighten the loopholes with folks that are putting their money offshore. And we know a number of corporations throughout the country, including some right here in North Carolina, have done that. And I was never quite sure how he was going to do that, because there are a lot of folks that put their money in the Cayman Islands, put their money in various other places that are basically hidden away and things of that nature, even offshore banks and things along those lines. But I wasn't quite clear what kind of enforcement methods he was going to be able to put out there in order to catch those folks, because that's been going on for decades. I'm in my late 50s, and I can definitely say that's been going on. I've heard about it at least since the 70s and the 80s, when I was a teen and a young man in my 20s. So definitely it's been going on for a long time, and probably even before that. So what are some of the ways that you think he'll be able to enforce what he said he wants to stop, which is those offshore bank loopholes?
Well, I'm going to defer to probably Sasha on this question, because I'm not really the economics guy. But my idea would be, number one, I think one of the things he's very interesting. I mean, I think there are things that you might be able to do in terms of, not allowing corporations to, for example, sell billions of dollars of product or services and then pay no tax, right? So this is happening a lot in the technology industry. So you might have to require through kinds of, formulas. And I think there's been some laws on the books that they've tried to propose for companies like Amazon and Facebook. And this has happened in the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, GlaxoSmithKline, which is headquartered in Raleigh, sold billions of dollars. Their UK headquarters is in UK. And they sold billions of product. And when the IRS came to pay the tax, they said, no, we don't have to pay the tax. Our headquarters is in England. Although 85% or 90% of their sales was in the US, right? And so I guess you could just require and limit corporations from doing that. I don't know how you start market economics. I mean, I can tell you today that the companies that were offshoring to India or outsourcing to India, you're not seeing that as much anymore, because in the tier 1 cities in India, the cost before COVID, I don't know what it's like now, but the cost of real estate, the price of labor had gone up. And so it really wasn't that much of an advantage. So you are seeing some companies go back to a hybrid model, an insourcing model. So I guess the president could say, corporations would have to limit the number of jobs they would outsource so that those jobs would be in America. But Sasha, how would we close the loophole? How would you make it harder for companies to put their money overseas?
Well, if there is a will, there will be a way to do it. Besides changing some laws, which probably would have to be done, but it will take some time, it will take some efforts, some resistance, whatever. You can deal with that even under existing laws. If you will get an army of lawyers and accountants, and they will go after every single company one by one and ask them to produce their income tax returns for the last 75 years. You will make their life miserable. That's really what it's all about. So, okay, you want to hide the money. Okay, we'll make your life miserable. And you will keep hiding the money, but it will cost you so much doing that it will become just unprofitable. And it's better probably to say, okay, what do you want? What do you want from me? Okay, you want more taxes. How much? Oh, no, that's too much. I'll pay you just a little bit here, a little bit there. I mean, it's fairly simple if there is a will. It appears to me that there is a will, and I think it will be a very popular move on electorate at large. So they will see that he is really minding business of United States, how to improve its financial position. And between you and me, I don't think there are a lot of people in the United States who love this big corporations for various reasons. So they will be cheered and applaud, and it will be very popular measures to take.
Rakesh, what are your thoughts about this issue? Do you have any
Yeah,
ideas about what we could do?
I was just wondering, instead of applying sanctions to countries like Russia who hardly have any dealings with, or China, China has dealings, but Russia doesn't have. Why don't you apply sanctions to little countries like Cayman Islands? Just say that if you do this, any person from Cayman Islands who wants to visit the USA will take 3.5 years to get his visa. Put something like that. I mean, I'm really not an expert on this, but I'm sure, like Sasha says, where there's a will, there's a way. Just make it difficult for those countries to get anything from the United States if they cooperate with criminals who want to just hide away, money in their bank accounts.
Yes, and I think that I think this is an issue that we need to track, and we're going to get after 30 minutes. We're going to get into just our healthy debate and talk about some unreported stories. But the other thing is, so it was a bold initiative for the president. He talked about climate change. He talked about immigration reform. He talked about the insurrection of democracy, race relations. He almost choked up with emotion when he talked to George Floyd's daughter and said that, your daddy did change the world. And he talked about, justice in America. But he did spend some time on guns, and I didn't talk about that in my monologue. So the main thing is eliminating ghost guns, which I learned from the president what those were. He explained it in detail. So putting all the parts together for a gun, but not having a serial number. So they get these kits and they can bring the gun. And then the guns are getting into the wrong hands of folks with mental illness. So are there any thoughts about what you would like to see the president do with guns? And do you agree? Well, we don't have Shaquille Latimer here. We don't have Brandon here and a few others that are a little bit more gun rights. But the president claims that this isn't a Second Amendment issue. He says that for many years from the founding of America, or when machine guns were produced, you weren't allowed to have machine guns. Those were for military forces, certain guns for police officers. So what is your take on guns in America, real quickly, before we move on? And then talk about the political sausage of the U.S. Senate. Mark?
As I've stated several times on this network and everything, I can't see of a reason for the common man to have an assault rifle. So like I said, I think that those efforts to ban those kind of things, as well as some of the other things that are out there, are definitely needed to be enforced. By the way, I loved his comical remark about the ways of going hunting and his assault rifle. I forgot the exact line, but it was definitely one of the comical moments that he had intentionally put out there and everything. So he was definitely saying that, as I had said several times, if you're going out hunting pheasants, or even if you're hunting a big animal like a deer, which can provide meat as well, you're not going to have much meat left if you're doing it with an assault rifle or something that's firing several rounds and all of that. So it kind of defeats the purpose. So definitely, I think that things like that, I was, like you, not familiar totally with the term ghost gun, but I know that there are gun kits. I wasn't sure what they were called and things of that nature. So for him to explain that to the public was a wonderful thing. And I definitely think that any kind of things that you're going to put out there, they can be created and just made up. And we know that that's not just guns. There are also, I think you can find online ways to make bombs and other things as well. So anything we can do to limit that access and stop the madness, because it is getting quite mad. Like I said, I think it was last week, right after the verdict from Derek Chauvin, there were like about 5 or 6 new incidents of things going on between the police and citizens of America and things along those lines. So definitely, we've got to find ways to reform the police system, get the bad apples out, as President Biden put it, and everything. Because I do agree with him. The majority of the people that are working in law enforcement are doing it because it's a calling of a sort, and they're doing it because they actually care about their community and care about society. But there are bad apples out there, and we got to find a way to root them out of the police force. But we've also got to find a way not to have everybody have access to what I would call the insane guns. I too am somewhat of a person that believes that that if you want a gun or even a sword, as we had in our family at one point, and everything, I think it was something my dad got from one of his military days and everything. But if you want something to defend your household, I'm perfectly for that and everything, because there are bad elements in all societies and all of that. But I think you need to find ways to secure it. And I think you need to find ways to definitely also make sure that it is not accidentally discharged. And then we don't need to be having folks that are having insane weapons, as I would call them.
Rakesh, any thoughts about guns? It seems like you're in agreement with Mark. I mean, you think there's no reason to have these
Yeah, I
kind
think, yeah. Guns are made, each kind of gun is made for a purpose. And if that is a legitimate purpose for the normal citizen, they should be able to possess it, like a handgun, like a 38 or a 45 if you stretch it. A 45 Magnum, I would say, is something beyond what is required for a normal person, but a normal 38 or a 45 should be fine. For the purposes of self-defense, because it's a vast country and sometimes police may not be able to cover the entire area. So self-defense is a legitimate issue. But to have an assault rifle, I would agree with Mark. I wouldn't belabor the point. The fact of the matter is, an assault rifle has only got a legitimate use in the hands of a soldier, and that's it.
Okay, wonderful. Sasha, any thoughts about guns before we talk a little bit about the political ramifications of the speech, and then I want to talk a little bit about Tim Scott, the U.S. senator, getting
Very
his
quickly,
response.
there are a lot of issues on this point. You were talking about the police brutality and the gun issue. Okay, very quickly, police brutality will always be there, because think about what people are willing to join police force. There are people who cannot find any better use for their talents, so they're going to work for police where there is a pretty good pay. However, there is a risk involved. So using the guns and killing innocent people actually eliminate risk for police officers who are doing so, and it guarantees them that they will come back home in the evening. So the use of force, it's inherited in the people who are joining police force for life. And the only thing, as I said before, don't obey, don't fight the police, obey their orders. That will help you, same as police, to come home alive. Now, about gun issue, that's a problem with the Second Amendment. Couple of hundred or so years ago, a group of slave owners came up with the idea of Second Amendment, and it's still valid today. This is incredible. This has to go ASAP. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about. I call it where the sausage is made. In the room where it happens, from the Hamilton song, the Senate, the House. The reality politically, and I think it's an important point I made, is that President Biden just doesn't have the numbers of an Obama or a Bill Clinton for the first 2 years of Clinton's presidency, or even a Roosevelt, right? So think about it. I mean, it's a tiebreak in the Senate. Joe Manchin is, I think, his opportunity, but also nightmare, because Senator Manchin has said that he will not support, from my home state of West Virginia, any legislation that isn't bipartisan. Do you believe that the president, by being so bold and progressive on taxes, on spending, on immigration, in terms of not really dealing with the border situation, do you believe this could backfire for him in the midterms? And that, is he being politically savvy by playing to the Trump base by saying, "Hey, those jobs that are going to be created, guess what? You don't have to have a college degree." So what do you all thinking there? Is there a political risk he's taking by being so bold? Mark, I'm going to start with you.
I mean, it's definitely a political risk. I mean, we've seen what a divided house can do, not just here in America, but around the world and things of that nature. So definitely it's a risk that he's taken, but I think it's a calculated risk. And I think that he feels that he can win some of the folks over from the Republican side, as definitely some of the Trump voters, with some of the things that he is putting out there, be that the effort to give folks what you might call universal education if they want to go into the community college version. So it'd be like universal higher education, because he didn't say anything about everybody being guaranteed college education, but like 4-year colleges. But definitely the community college and things along those lines would be something that folks would definitely get behind, and definitely new job creations. And I even heard him make some overtures out to some of the Republican leadership. I think he not acknowledged what Mitch McConnell had done in terms of naming some, I think it was a bill or something like that, after Hunter Biden, his son, and things along those lines, when he was talking about some of the research that's out there, not just with COVID, but some of the other things that are going on as well. So I definitely feel that he's making some overtures towards some of the Republican leadership. I think they're having a meeting, if not later this week, next week, just like he's having and has been having meetings with world leaders as well. So definitely, it's a calculated risk, but it's a political thing, and that's oftentimes what you do, whether you're doing that in the local elections or whether you're doing that on the national and international stage. You have to take those calculated risks and hope that they pay off for you in the long run. Like I said, and in some cases, they don't pay off, and you decide to back off and not run for office, or decide not to do things along those lines. But definitely, I think that it was a great move that he made in terms of some of his overtures that he's given, and I think he'll continue to make those overtures. But I think that it's a winnable situation, and I don't think that it will necessarily go against the Democratic Party in the midterms. I'm actually seeing a lot of, because I get their emails and everything, a lot of mobilization is already going out on some of the difficult races, including those right here in North Carolina, because North Carolina is going to be a very interesting race for Bird's seat, because we have some interesting candidates on both sides, because it's just saw that some new candidates came in on the Republican side. And of course, there's even folks that are very proud of the fact that Sherry Beasley, who is a Supreme Court justice, is looking at running on the Democratic side and will be a very formidable candidate.
Yeah. Sasha, I'm going to go to our chess player, because, this is strategy, right? Chess is a strategic game. Is the president playing it well politically as a strategist, as a chess player? Is he moving the chess pieces on the board correctly, or do you believe he's putting himself at risk for a conservative revolt against his liberal agenda, as Senator Scott has said?
I think whenever you're doing anything, there is a risk involved. Even if you're crossing the street, there is a certain risk. I think, generally speaking, what I see is that Joe Biden and Democrats are on a roll right now. Being on a roll, let's see, for example, if you're playing casino, for example, you have a lucky break maybe for a few minutes, and then you have to maximize your bets, because this is a time when you have to really go for the winnings. Or on a stock market, when you're playing and you feel that almost with everything what you're doing, it just turns out to be right. You're on a roll, go for it, make incredible bets, and because that's the time to make it really. So Joe Biden he's on a roll, Democrats on a roll, they have to go big. No, it seems to me that what's his name? Joe Manchin, that loose cannon. I think he's trolling everybody. I think he's trying to make it for the Republicans that he's a fair man and he's trying to do something or so on. I don't think that he is serious about ever opposing Joe Biden and all Democratic Party.
Well, he is. And I'm going to try to get Senator Manchin on the show because I know Senator Manchin. I'm from West Virginia, but I think Senator Manchin is from a conservative state, and he has no choice but to appease to the Republicans. He could not be reelected as U.S. Senator if he didn't have the support of Republicans, right? And so that's something interesting to see is how much of a role can he play. Rakesh, I'm going to talk a little about Tim Scott, but what are your thoughts about the president? Is he playing it too risky by being so bold and progressive, or do you think you just got to say, "Gosh, I'm all in, and this is what I want to do"? Do you think it could backfire?
I don't think so. I think I'm not really that familiar with the nuances of American politics, but I think if I wanted to do something, I would state my intention very clearly, especially if I felt that the people, at the ground level, would approve of it. What the politicians do, I'm sure he has enough advisors who would guide him to, help him navigate through the houses of parliament, the House of Representatives and the Senate both. And I can't comment about his strategy, but I do think that you do need to state your position, and then there will be opposition. Yeah, you deal with it, and I think they can. They may not be able to run very smooth, but eventually I think they will prevail.
Hey,
Okay.
Steve, before we get to Tim, and I've got some things that I want to say about Tim Scott as well.
Yeah,
But before we get to Tim and everything, I did have a question, and it's actually geared toward Rakesh, and it's actually coming back to something else that you said you were going to ask later. One of the things that I was quite proud of with the president's speech is that he definitely acknowledged that for the first time, there were, in the seats of power, there were two women there because, this Speaker of the House is a woman, Nancy Pelosi, and of course, the other person sitting adjacent to her and everything was our vice president. So definitely, we're seeing here in the United States, women's kind of stepping into their power role in that sense. And of course, there are a lot of women in leadership in the Senate. Like I've stated before, I'm a fan of AOC and what some people call the squad and all of that. And there are others that are there as well, including Maxine Waters. But what I was going to ask Rakesh is that when we look on the global stage, and we are the international broadcast media about to be Pod TV and all of that, but when we look at the international arena, one of the women that we hear the most about, or at least we used to, but I haven't heard much about her lately, is the leadership of the woman from New Zealand. So I want to hear from Rakesh, how is she doing? How is her leadership being perceived and all of that? Because I know that when COVID first came out, she got a whole lot of great marks, and not just marks for the way that she handled the medical situation, being in the pandemic, but also the way she was handling that country that you are part of. So I just wanted to hear if that was still the case and how that was going. As like I said, she's definitely got some very high remarks marks that I had heard about. But in comparison to, say, our U.S. president, how is your leader doing as a woman leader?
I don't think that it's got anything to do with her being a woman leader. She doesn't play the gender card at all. In fact, she's handling the economy far better than the prophets of doom and gloom. New Zealand is doing quite well. There were people who said that her strategy was flawed and it's too much of spending. But actually, she's working it out quite well. New Zealand is actually doing quite well. The economy is growing quite fast, and the first thing she's addressed is that people need a house. The basic needs. So a lot of in Auckland itself, where about 1/3 or maybe even more than 1/3 of the population lives, she's allowed the construction of buildings. And what that has done is it has democratized the availability of housing. and young, couples who are starting off in the property ladder, they're doing pretty well. In my own suburb, I've seen quite a few buildings come up where we had only, simple houses, standalone houses. So I think she's got her strategy very well thought out. She's doing well, I would say. On the whole, I would say she's doing well, much to the disappointment of the opposition, who are in complete disarray at the moment.
What kind of advice do you think that she would give to President Biden? Like I said, I know he's talking to world leaders. I'm sure he's talking to her as well. So I know you don't have necessarily her ear, but if you have some speculation as just from watching your TV and everything as to what kind of advice you think she would give. I know one thing that it sounds like she would probably tell them is to look at our own housing market, because that's something that even we need to explore here on the United States and everything. But what other kind of things do you think that she may be trying to tell President Biden, or at least advise him that he might want to consider?
I think she might, well, if at all, she would say anything, she would talk to him a little bit about China. It is a fact that China is a very strong and dynamic country, um, irrespective of what kind of political system they have. Every group of people have their choice as to what kind of political system they want. And I think President Biden is doing that. He's not, sort of making noise about China unnecessarily. He's talking about things that concern him. China is already wise to the fact that the West becomes selectively interested in democracy and human rights, while they have their own cesspools like Guantanamo Bay and whatever. So China is aware, and you can't fool them with all those things. If you think that they're going to be abashed or in any way defensive, they're not. They're going to. That's what you saw in Anchorage. So that's all I would say. She's working, while keeping America as an ally. She knows that the economy of New Zealand is fairly involved with the economy of China. So I think that's the only area where they would probably work together.
Then I
This
got
is
one question for Sasha, that I'll be done with my little rants and rates and everything. But Sasha, we oftentimes talk about in America about human rights and human right violations. Rakesh just actually alluded to it to some degree and everything. And of course, we oftentimes look at Russia, we look at Cuba, we look at those other countries that have gross human rights violations. But there are actually political prisoners in the United States, and we don't actually oftentimes talk about them. I mean, there's definitely the guys that were involved in Move, which is out of Philadelphia, and they're still in prison. I think Leonard Peltier, who's a Native American activist, is still in prison and everything. So there are political prisoners that exist within the United States. When you, as one that now lives in Canada, talk to your American friends and things along those lines, or even when you talk back to people in Russia, do they actually even think about the fact that America also has some folks like in situations like Guantanamo Bay that Rakesh just alluded to, as well as what's going on with the border, and definitely some folks in the United States prison that could be considered political prisoners? So do they even acknowledge that, or do they even think about that, and do you have those conversations?
Okay, in Canada, it's not very popular thinking about the political prisoners in the United States, because in Canada, I'm not sure even if Canada has any political prisoners. Um, well, I never really dig into it. America has political prisoners, obviously. Russia has political prisoners, that's for sure. Well, Russia is always being on the defensive whenever it's been accused of something. And then they would say, well, America, look at yourself. You were killing Indians, you were killing blacks, you were killing this people and that people. And now you have political prisoners, so you have no moral or any other rights to tell us what to do and how to do and when to do. And it's been there for a long, long time, and I don't think this all being resolved in any shape or form.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Steve, I'm tossing it back to you, but I don't know if you got any thoughts about human rights as well. But those were just some things that were in my
Well,
mind that I
yeah,
was really wondering
I had
about.
so much. I had so much to do this morning when I was preparing my monologue, but we didn't talk all about the foreign policy. But the president did really call out China and to say that, I've met with Prime Minister Chang, and uh, you know, he's against democracy, and they do not believe democracy is the answer, and that sort of implied human rights violations. I think it's important for the United States as our foreign policy to make sure that we're ensuring that democracy and human rights are enforced around the world. Now, we can't be the policeman of the world. He did mention pulling out the troops of Afghanistan; their objectives were met, but this is a part of U.S. foreign policy. It always has been, as the leader of the free world. I think this is something we have to work on with our allies, though, Mark. I think
Mhm.
we have to make sure we're working with Britain and Europe and Canada and other countries. And then we talked about the Quad, Australia, Japan, India, and United States. But there's even human rights violations going on in India a little bit, just in terms of targeting religious minorities and things like that. So, I think it's important, Mark, and
Oh yeah.
maybe that's something we talk about. We haven't been following what's going on in Myanmar, um,
Hmm.
Burma, lots of stuff there. Venezuela, not too
Yep.
far. We hear the president talking much about the Southern Hemisphere.
Or,
And
or even talking about some of the women rights violations that are existing in some of the countries that are excuse me, are our allies, because definitely I've definitely have a friend that is in the West Coast. She's a Pakistani comedian, and she oftentimes on her show on that she does, I believe it's on YouTube and everything, she talks oftentimes about the some of the violations that have existed against women historically in Pakistan and in the other parts of that Asian market and everything. So she talks openly about it, and even says that sometimes she gets hate mail and other kind of things have gone against her when she goes back to visit her homeland and all of that. So definitely that's something that we have not touched on, is that some of the violations that may be even existing within the field of gender equality.
no, I'm gonna exactly. And so we got about 8, 10 more minutes left, but I'm gonna end before we talk about some other things going on in the world. Maybe we'll have a debate on a controversial issue. But Tim Scott, United States Senator, only Republican black senator, and now there's only two in the Senate. Raphael Warnock from Georgia,
Mhm.
the newly elected senator from Georgia, but a rising star in the Republican Party. This is a man, interesting enough, a black man, grew up poor, admitted in his speech that he did walk into stores watching over his shoulder. He experienced racism. He talked about religion and faith and his single mother. And he claims that Biden is being too partisan. And what is as a black man who I think you lean more Democratic, what is it like for you to see Tim Scott, a black Republican, that didn't seem to be vicious in his talk? Right? He started growing on me with his empathy, although I am concerned about what he's saying about the Georgia law, because what he's saying seems to be so different than what I'm hearing on the ground over there in Georgia on the voting law. What
Yeah,
are
it
your
seems
thoughts?
much different than what I'm hearing in terms of like the rights of folks in Georgia and all of that. And some of that is somebody trying to paint a prettier picture that I think actually exists. I mean, some of the things that he said within his narrative are very much appealing and things along those lines. Definitely, to hear somebody talking about their family going from cotton to the Congress and everything is an amazing storyline, and definitely he follows that storyline quite deliberately, and definitely he talks about that on a regular basis. Some of the things he said I don't necessarily agree with. He talks about that Operation Warp Speed was the reason that the vaccinations were out there so fast and everything along those lines. He's definitely a Trumpster in that sense. And while I'm not saying that the former president might not have had some role in what was going on after he had also denied that the disease was even out there and was even something that we need to be concerned about. Yeah, of course you're going to do an Operation Warp Speed after you've already, set us not behind the goalpost, but like set us into a whole nother stadium and everything. So of course you've got to like do some serious catch up. So that would be major warp speed, if I can use that sports analogy and everything. So definitely, try to make it seem as if this was an amazing feat on the part of the president. I disagreed with that. I also, and I think I have friends that work in HBCUs. I don't know necessarily that was the first time that HBCUs have gotten relief from any president and things along those lines as he tried to claim, and a couple of the other claims that he made. He's definitely a great orator and a great conversationalist and everything of that nature. I've actually on LinkedIn reached out to some of his aides and people. I don't know him from Adam, to use that old saying, but neither has Nick known some of the people that we've had on the show or myself. But sometimes we can find ways to reach folks, and who knows, maybe they'll come on our network and they can tell us more of their story, and we can gather more knowledge. I mean, one of the greatest stories here in this area is Soul City, and Soul City was started in Warren County area, and it was supposed to be like a black community, an all black community, and it's now pretty much not happening. But that person that ran that, his son has definitely been involved in our state politics, Floyd McKissick Jr., but the original Floyd McKissick Sr., was a Republican and a Richard Nixon type Republican. So, a black Republican that's into enterprise zones and things of that nature, that's not necessarily new. There have been a couple of others. I mean, some people would even argue that Kanye West may fall in that category currently. So there are some of the things that they want, like enterprise zones and, ways to encourage more entrepreneurship within the African American community. Even I, as you could it, as a progressive Democrat, can get behind some of those ideas. But like I said, I need to see what the details are going to be and what the harm will be as well. So I want to see, not just that you're going to give some money or give some aid here and there, but not have the follow through. So like I said, I need to know more about what's being proposed. And he said that he had some proposals even in some of the health areas and some of the other areas that he's concerned about that he claims were shot down by the Democrats. And I haven't read enough to know whether that's the case or not the case. But definitely, is like you said, is a rising star. And there have been other rising stars as well. I would not be surprised to see. And that would be a formidable ticket if they don't try to put together, but that would be an all South ticket. And I can't see that winning. But both him and Nikki Haley, who is also from the that area as well, are definitely rising stars. And who knows, they might try to put them together as a combination, but that might be a little too Southern.
Well, absolutely. We got 4 minutes left. So we're going to talk about Tim Scott, continue to talk about Tim Scott eventually. He is a rising star. Would not surprise me to see him one day run for the White House or be on the ticket. And it's going to be very interesting to see. Any final thoughts about other things that we need to talk about before we close out today? I'm going to start with you, Sasha.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Sasha, any final thoughts?
I'll finish where I started. I think that Biden is actually surpassing all expectations. There are some rising stars in the Republican Party, but the Biden is a real star of not only Democratic but American and maybe even world politics. I'm impressed.
Fantastic. Rakesh, any final thoughts?
Not connected with the US, but it's interesting to see what's happening in France with a cultural divide there and a lot of Islamic extremists attacking ordinary people because they feel that they have different moral or what you can say religious views. So a group of retired generals wrote to President Macron saying that if you keep up with this kind of immigration, you're going to have civil war in France. It's just something which was peripheral to the US, but it's important from the point of view of human rights and also from the point of view of what a person who is an immigrant, what duties they have with reference to the host country. That's an area which is quite interesting. I don't know whether you want to discuss that, but it's just something which struck my mind.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about that in the future and everything, because
Well,
that's
I
definitely
think
something that is quite interesting. If I can just defer to another issue totally, which is in the world of sports, because a long time ago, for many years, I've always said that I wanted to go ever since reading Fear and Loathing at the Kentucky Derby to the Kentucky Derby. And in my now almost 60 years, I've yet to make it and won't make it this year as well. But one of the jockeys is actually a historical jockey. So for the first time in many decades, there is a black jockey that will be on top of one of the horses. So much shout out to Kendrick Camachi, I believe is how you pronounce his last name and everything. And he is actually the redemption story to some degree for his father, because his father, who was a jockey as well several decades ago, was actually caught up in a scandal. It was called like the Great Fog Scandal or something like that, where he basically put his horse on a foggy race and came the horse out of the gates, so it appeared that he won, even though what he did was he moved the horse further ahead and everything, and cheated his way to victory, and was punished for that and everything, and was actually banned from the sport for several years and everything. But then he got back in the sport, and then his son has been training and looks like a rising star in the world of horse racing. So definitely, if anybody's into that, like I said, I think he's a long shot. I mean, if you're like Sasha, a betting man, he's a long shot to win and everything. But apparently, he was a long shot at one of the other races and came back and won by a nose, and gave some of those people that were supporting him some good old fashioned cash and things of that nature. So sometimes those long shots can win. It seems like apparently he gave a kiss to the horse and then, gave him a little slap on the rump, and then he took off and won by a nose and everything. So that's how he won this race. I believe it might have been in Baltimore or one of the other popular horse racing places. But now he will be running on Saturday, May 1st, and the Kentucky Derby will be taking place. There will be an audience there, apparently much less than the usual hundreds of thousands and everything. I think that they're saying 40,000 on the infield and maybe 15,000 in the stand or something like that. So it'll be about maybe a third of what people would usually see. But on May 1st, which is this Saturday, the Kentucky Derby will be taking place. And while I'm not an avid horse fan and horse racer, I do follow just about every year the Triple Crown and try to hope for a Triple Crown winner.
Yeah, we're out of time. I wanted to thank you all for being here today. As I close out the show, I think it's important to understand that it's been a very turbulent 100 days. That's one thing that was, as I close out, just to remind ourselves of this president who is now flying in the cockpit, leading the crew of the American people to better times. We have been in the midst of a pandemic where more people have died than World War One, the Vietnam War, and World War II. In the midst of insurrection or democracy, racial turmoil, gun violence. But President Biden, on his dashboard as he flies our plane to sunnier skies, has been consistent that he's going to focus on climate change. He's going to continue to get us out of the pandemic. He's going to build back our economy by investing in our infrastructure and jobs. He's putting checks in the hands of the American people and doing all of this while he tries to navigate the political storms ahead. I think if turbulence was the word that described 2020, hopefully beginning on the 101st day of his presidency, we will stabilize the flight on this journey that we are in America, and also help our allies around the world deal with this pandemic. We wish the president and Vice President Harris all the best on day 101. Today, he is visiting President Jimmy Carter in Georgia, and he was the first politician as a U.S. Senator to endorse Jimmy Carter, who is, yes, a young, sprightly 95 years of age. We hope it's a wonderful meeting between our former president and the 46th president of the United States. It's been an honor to be here with you today on World Edition. We'll be back tomorrow for the Build Back Better plan, and I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. This is Steve Rao signing off. Thank you very much. God bless each of you.